Welcome to Sculpting the Soul, where we explore the art and science of transformative surgery. In today's episode, we have an exciting and insightful discussion lined up. We'll be sharing a remarkable patient story that highlights the transformative power of plastic surgery, showcasing how it can change lives for the better. We'll also delve into the other side of the coin, a story of a botched surgery when a patient wasn't happy with their results from a surgery. Dr. Kalus is going to share the steps of how he improved their surgery and why plastic surgery isn't a permanent look. Finally, we'll talk about how to recognize when it's the right time for you to consider plastic surgery. What factors did you weigh, and how do you know if you're ready for this journey? Join us today as we explore these compelling themes and continue our mission to inform and inspire. Dr. Kalus, let's get started.
Great. Glad to be here, Alan. Thank you.
Absolutely. So as we jump right in here, Dr. Kalus, can you share a remarkable patient story that illustrates the positive impact of plastic surgery on someone's life?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Alan, we think about the notion of walking out every day and going about our lives. And all of us are very busy, whether we're young in school or whether we're young professionals, running a company, whatever. The challenge for all of us is to be essentially our personal best. And this is particularly true in the younger patients. And because in the younger patient, you know, our personalities, our egos, our sense of self is still forming. And one of the patients that I recall vividly was a high school student. She was a junior, and she was a great kid. She had been historically in middle school and early in high school doing just fine. But she came in with her mom because this young lady was more and more obsessed, if that's the right word, certainly preoccupied, I guess is a better word, with the fact that she was unattractive, and primarily because of her nose. And what's interesting about the nose, everybody thinks about a nose job or a rhinoplasty. That's a very, very common and well understood aspect of plastic surgery. It's certainly one of the most common procedures that plastic surgeons perform, and one of the most common procedures people think about when they think about plastic surgery, a quote unquote nose job. Well, at any rate, this was a very intelligent young lady. She had done well in school. But she did have a disproportionately large nose to her thin face. She had beautiful skin. She had a nice figure. She was athletic. And she was quite convinced that the unattractiveness of her nose made her unattractive, and the spillover from feeling unattractive was becoming a little bit more antisocial. And her mother came in with her literally because her school performance was starting to suffer, her social life was starting to suffer, and she'd even been to a psychologist with her mom, a counselor, to see what was going on. Why were her grades beginning to fail? Why was she getting depressed, et cetera, et cetera. And this young lady had articulated to Mom, I really want to see a plastic surgeon about my nose. And I evaluated this young lady, and it was clear to me that she would derive a benefit from having a rhinoplasty to try to enhance her nasal appearance. And the reason this case stands out in my mind is because after we performed a rhinoplasty on her, which was fairly simple and straightforward and uncomplicated, I don't recall a more powerful transformation in an individual than I saw in this young lady. She was literally on cloud nine. She was skipping into the office. She had this big beaming smile, and all of a sudden that sort of negative, sulking energy that I first met her with had disappeared, and all of a sudden she was like a ray of sunshine, coming in and happy, and the mom reported that her grades shot back up, and all of a sudden she felt like she was the most popular girl in school. And so even though we can be sort of simplistically thinking, oh, it's a nose job, it's vanity, it's that kind of thing, it really, if you dig a little bit deeper, you can understand how something as simple as enhancing the features of a nose to be a little bit more well proportioned for the face, it can be quite transformative. And just for your listeners to understand, this is just a little bit more of a conversation about the way we interact with each other. So everybody knows about eye contact and how important it is. And when we look at each other in conversation, our eyes actually make 3 subconscious stops, like a bus stop. One is the eye contact, which we're all familiar with. The other is, as we're talking to each other, the eyes subconsciously of the listener move to the lips of the person talking. And then the third stop that inevitably occurs, and again it's subconscious, is the nose. And the nose is sort of like the bullseye. It's the target. It's the center point of our face. So when one performs a rhinoplasty, which is the focal point of the face, literally the center point of the face, it literally transforms the whole face, because when we look at each other, even though we're making eye contact or looking at the lips or looking at the nose, we're not really looking at and analyzing that facial feature. We always see the whole face. We see someone's face and we're not thinking about their eyebrow or their nose or their lip or their cheek or their chin. And each one of these features is contributing its own piece. But one of the most important components of the face, because it occupies the center point of the face, is the nose. And so the optics of the visual changes that occur from a rhinoplasty impacting on the whole face, it's a little bit like throwing a pebble into a pond and seeing the rings spread out. That's the way we see the face. The face is the nose is sort of like the pebble that sent rings out throughout to impact the entire appearance of the face.
So as you think through that journey, what are some of the key factors that you would measure their success or their satisfaction from that surgery afterwards?
Well, it's actually quite simple. When my nurse tells me so-and-so is here for her first post-operative visit, I knock on the door, I walk in, and either the patient is smiling and happy to see me or they're not. Thankfully, most of the time they are. But that's the first impression. You can tell almost immediately if a patient is pleased with their outcome, if they're doing well, if they're not in pain, if their expectations have been met. So, that's part of what makes this job so much fun, because I feel very privileged, Alan, to possess, after many, many years of training and experience, a certain skill set that I almost feel obliged to share with those who might benefit from my experience or skill set. And so the ability to impact so powerfully on somebody's life is incredibly humbling, and I consider it a real privilege.
That's incredible. I mean, you really are making people enjoy their lives better, and that's certainly a very fulfilling experience and emotion to get to carry with you as you go into work every day. I want to touch for a minute on the other side of that, though, right? Because you mentioned whenever you first walk in the room, the other are looking very happy, or they're not. And while it may not be your patient that has an unhappy look, there are certainly, I'm sure, consults that you walk into where they don't have a happy look on their face to even have to be there for the consult. So the thought is that whenever you get plastic surgery done, you're making permanent changes to the way that you look. But from what I understand, that's not always the case, is it?
Well, I would say that the way to think about it is this. Within reason, we can almost always modify an outcome that is suboptimal. If there's a scar that is wide, if there is an angulation to something like the nose, or if there's a little depression in the breast, or if there's a little outpouching from liposuction, there's almost always something that we can do to modify it in a good way, in a positive direction. But I think you're touching on the idea that if someone had plastic surgery and they're unhappy with their outcome, does this automatically destine them to remain unhappy with this unfavorable outcome? And there are articles and books written about the unfavorable result or outcome, or the unhappy patient. And sadly, those patients are out there. Without tooting my own horn, I would say thankfully that I don't have very many unhappy patients. But I think as your listeners think about this, if any plastic surgeon ever tells them, oh, all my patients are happy and all my results are great, the first thing you should do is walk out, because they're definitely not telling you the truth. We're all human beings with different personalities and different expectations, and we can't make everybody happy every time. But that said, if a patient is unhappy with their outcome for whatever reason, they should know that even though the results of any given surgery are in fact permanent, it doesn't mean that they're not changeable. So if someone is walking around with X result after surgery, there's a chance that might get better over time. But unfortunately, surgery is the bell that cannot be unrung. The question is, do we get another shot at ringing another bell? And that's revision surgery. And that can almost always be done.
So, can you maybe elaborate about a story or experience where you have had a patient come in that wasn't happy, either with the initial surgery or maybe it's years after, and how you go through the process of correcting, somebody else's work that they're not happy with to get them to where they are satisfied? Is it simply a matter of just a whole new surgical experience, or do you have to take certain steps, and are there now limitations that are there?
Well, that's a great question, and I think there are some general statements that I can make about surgery that didn't go as well as expected and the outcome is unfavorable. And then there are some specifics. And I think the one patient or category, I would say, that comes to mind, and I certainly have patients that I can think of, but there are two unique categories of patient where the unfavorable outcome is particularly impactful. One is the cosmetic patient. This is a patient who comes in for whatever reason, and they've paid out of pocket for an operation, be it on their tummy or on their breast. A mommy makeover is not uncommon, a facelift, any one of these cosmetic surgery procedures, and there are many more. And they've thought about the reason they're coming to surgery is to enhance or improve their otherwise normal situation. For example, if a breast is drooping a little bit after nursing a couple of kids, that's normal. It may not be ideal, and it may not be making that young mom happy, but there's nothing abnormal about it. It may just not be optimal. So she might be coming for a breast lift or a breast lift and an augmentation if she needs to be a little bit bigger. And if that operation goes south, if that operation has a result that is unfavorable, to me that's a disaster, because this patient came in normal, healthy, but a little bit unhappy about something, and now that she underwent an operation to make her better and feel better about herself, she's actually worse off. That's a terrible, terrible outcome. That's on the cosmetic side of things. On the reconstructive side of things, I would say that, and this is a very significant part of my practice, Alan, one of the most impacted patient is the breast cancer patient who comes in with a very scary diagnosis, the big C. Everybody's scared of cancer. And Thankfully, most breast cancers these days are discovered very early with a very, very high success rate at curing for a nice, long, healthy life. But in the patient who requires either a lumpectomy or a mastectomy to treat the cancer, if she has a reconstruction that doesn't go according to plan, this can be so incredibly impactful. And let me just elaborate on that for a minute. There's so much emotion associated with the journey of being treated for breast cancer. Oftentimes, these women are young. Our patients can be young. They don't have to be necessarily middle age or older. The spectrum of age in which breast cancer can present can be anywhere from 20s to later on in life, 70s and 80s, and everything in between. In the young woman or younger woman who's busy and active and may have young kids, this is incredibly disruptive. And the idea of being disfigured is a whole other element, and particularly with the breast, it has so many other layers because there's so much emotion associated with one's appearance, one's sense of attractiveness, one's sense of femininity. It can impact on relationships with one's partner. There can be so many layers. And so when a patient is facing the diagnosis and learns that she needs to undergo an operation that could potentially be disfiguring, and the solution to that is usually in our hands as the plastic surgeon to make that patient feel really good about her breast or breasts, to make her pretty and symmetrical. If that goes the wrong way, that could really be doubly impactful because now she's been impacted by the diagnosis, the disease process, the disfiguring surgery, and the loss of hope that the plastic surgeon and the reconstructive surgery was supposed to give her. And so those two categories, Alan, I would say are the two that are most impactful and come to mind when we end up with a patient with complications or an unfavorable outcome.
That's great insight. So let's talk a little bit about the process or journey of whenever somebody's considering getting plastic surgery. What are some of the reasons that a patient might consider getting plastic surgery, and how do you kind of help them evaluate their motivations for those?
Well, that's a fantastic question because it does touch on the fact that we're all complex entities, right? We're people with personalities and histories and relationships and emotions. And when we are bothered by our appearance, there are certain things we can do by ourselves. We can go to the hairdresser. We can buy different clothes. These are the things we can do in a very simple way on our own that somehow or other impact on our emotional state, the way we feel about ourselves. When you come and see a plastic surgeon, you're going to consult about something you can't fix by yourself. And if it's surgery that we're talking about, you need the help of a plastic surgeon. And what's going to make somebody do that? I would say that it doesn't have to be something that literally eclipses your life, that you have to be in a desperate, miserable state in order to get something corrected. You know, in 2024, we can do really safe, highly predictable surgery for a particular problem that the patient feels their quality of life would be enhanced if they underwent this. You know, a very simple example, one of the most common procedures I do and one of the happiest group of patients is the breast augmentation patient. You know, if a woman either grew up and was not blessed with the size breasts that she was hoping to have, I want to remind all of the younger patients out there that your worth and your value and your personality is not dependent on your breast size. I just want to remind all women of that fact. And I know that may sound a bit arrogant, but I'm just going to say it from the perspective of the plastic surgeon who sees a lot of women coming for breast augmentation. Having said that, the young patient, the adolescent who comes and notices that she's a whole lot less endowed than some of her girlfriends, that can be very impactful socially in the high school years, certainly, where there's so much peer pressure going on for all kinds of reasons, body image, weight issues, breast size issues, et cetera, et cetera. So one always has to try to keep a very healthy balance on what is normal, what is abnormal, when does one go see the plastic surgeon. I definitely encourage a lot of dialogue with people in your circle, whether it's your parents if you're young, whether it's your partner, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whomever. I think that ultimately we do things for ourselves, but having a support system is also important, someone you can rely on. But back to the question of getting something done for ourselves. I think the breast augmentation patient is the one that comes to mind as far as a really happy group of patients who we see and try to guide on their journey, because we, reflecting back on what you said with your last question about unfavorable outcomes, the most common reason a patient is unhappy after breast augmentation, Alan, is going to be size related. She feels either that she was made too big or not big enough. And we spend an inordinate amount of time making sure that we understand what the patient's goals are. But in my own practice, I try to achieve something that looks very, very natural. And that's true for any operation I perform. Whether it's a breast augmentation, breast reconstruction, rhinoplasty, facelift, we try to achieve a result that leaves no flashing neon sign on the patient's forehead saying, I had surgery, I am somehow enhanced, or these are fake. We try to achieve something that looks very natural and very pretty. And in the patient who comes to me, your original question was, what brings a patient to the plastic surgeon's office? I think it has to be a situation where the patient is thinking about something that is bothering them, that they'd like to explore possibly doing something about, and then just getting the opinion of a board-certified plastic surgeon and saying, hey, am I a good candidate for this? Should I do this or shouldn't I do this? The plastic surgeon should never be telling you, you should do this, because that's a little bit like trying to sell you a car. I see my role as someone with a knowledge base and skill set that I can offer to the person who could benefit from my services. And when we have a patient coming in for a consultation, it should be information gathering. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to schedule their surgery right then and there. If a patient comes to me with a particular thing they've been thinking about for years, for example, a 30-year-old woman who's been thinking about a breast augmentation since she was 18 because she just never got to be where she wants to be, then she's pretty well aware of where she is, what she's thinking. She's probably done a fair amount of research already. She may have friends that have undergone the surgery. But I consider our office sort of the ultimate destination in terms of really gaining the information that you can rely on and that you can build upon to make a very good, informed, educated decision.
So you mentioned adolescence, and then obviously the alternative out of the middle-aged woman that has made this decision. Is there a certain age that the body is done developing that you should, if it's on your mind, like, okay, you can start kind of considering it now, or is there, are we just always changing?
Right. Well, I'll answer the second half of your question first, and that is we are always changing. But obviously, the changes in our faces and bodies between childhood, adolescence, and adulthood are far more significant than into adulthood. So you can all, I'm sure your listeners can all appreciate the difference between 10 and 20 is way different from the difference between 20 and 30. In terms of the breast specifically, we see a lot of adolescent patients who have maybe reached maturity at age 16 or 17, but developed significant breast asymmetry. We've seen that not infrequently, where either both breasts are misshapen for some reason, or there's a huge size discrepancy, like 1 or 2 or 3 cup size discrepancy. And this is simply just bad luck. This is the way this particular patient developed, with some significant asymmetry, as opposed to subtle asymmetry, which is more the rule than the exception in women's breasts. Hardly any woman has 2 totally identical breasts. But when we see a very noticeable difference that can be very impactful emotionally, like a 2 cup size difference where the teenage girl needs to really feel very self-conscious and do something special with her bra just to put on a blouse and walk out the door, these patients do need to be considered for surgery if the patient decides she wants to, sometimes before necessarily they're fully mature, and that would require perhaps 2 stages of surgery. One operation might occur at, say, age 15 or 16, and then a second operation might occur at age 20 or 25. And the whole goal, Alan, for everything we do is to improve a patient's quality of life in real time. So if a patient is suffering now, we don't want to wait 10 years because by then she has totally matured. We want to impact on her life now when she's in distress, even if it means 2 operations 10 years apart. And as someone who, I have specialty training in pediatric plastic surgery and craniofacial surgery, we don't repair cleft lips at age 10 or 12 or 15, except if we're unfortunate enough to be in a third world country where they don't have access to high quality specialized care. So we repair cleft lips and palates in infancy at 6 weeks of age. But if you go to places in Central and South America, in Southeast Asia, and in places in Africa where these capabilities don't exist, you will find adults. And I've operated in Puerto Rico, I've operated in Panama, I've operated in many places where adults will come and see us with an unrepaired cleft lip. And depending on the cultural milieu of that person, the society, sometimes these children are ostracized. A lot of your listeners have seen commercials on TV for Operation Smile and Interplast, and there are a few other philanthropic organizations where you have volunteer plastic surgeons going to third world countries to help kids and adults with surgery that is otherwise unavailable in those countries. And I'm fortunate enough to have been privileged to participate in programs and expeditions such as these. So back to where we are, there's no question that we want to take advantage of the fact that we have the highest level of medical and surgical care available to us literally at our doorstep. And when we see a child or an adolescent in distress for something that can be corrected with reconstructive surgery or even cosmetic surgery, we don't think about cosmetic surgery for children. We think about that like facelifts and nose jobs. But remember, appearance is a continuum. And most of us would argue that a birth defect, oh yeah, that's reconstructive, that needs to be fixed. Well, where does that continuum become vanity? That's a very hard question to answer. And I will tell you that we repair a cleft lip in a child because we want to normalize their appearance. But if a patient has a scar and it's a bad scar, we want to try to help with that scar, even if it came from an accident in the playground, which may not sound like a big deal. Or maybe it was a car accident, and that car accident left a scar on the forehead, and it's not just a scar on the forehead, but it could be an element of PTSD because that accident might bring on terrible memories and nightmares. And if we can impact on that scar by doing a simple scar revision and help that person or child overcome the negative experience and memories of that episode, that's also on the continuum of appearance. So I think you can see where it becomes quite hazy, and every patient needs to be evaluated on their own merit, with their own individual personality and their own individual complaint, to see how we might be able to help them.
Well, and if you, so the next or the last question I have for you is, you have that patient that is out there that's maybe been considering getting plastic surgery done, and has either has some hesitancies, or they're not quite there yet, right? And they're considering that first step. What would you tell that potential patient that's kind of on the fence about it?
Well, I think most patients are smart enough to know what's the right timing. Maybe not specifically from the medical perspective, but I would say that if a person's quality of life is being impacted by whatever it is that's on their mind that they think a plastic surgeon can help them with, then that's the timing for at least the consultation. It may not be the timing for surgery. And there are many factors that go into the timing of surgery. I want all of your listeners to remember that plastic surgery is surgery, and therefore it is completely related to one's overall state of health, body weight, whether they're smokers or not, whether they're following a healthy lifestyle. Those are the things we try to encourage. We try to encourage good health and wellness in the setting of whatever it is we do as plastic surgeons. But the timing issue is very impactful, for example, in mommy makeovers, which is a very big part of my practice. If a young mom is distressed about the appearance of her tummy or her breasts, for example, after 1 or 2 or 3 kids, timing is critical, because if she has 3 or 2 or however many young children at home, she is not going to be super mom right after surgery. And that means that she's not available to her young children who may need her. So maybe the timing for a mommy makeover is when the kids are more like 3 or 4 or 5 as opposed to 1 or 2 or 3. So all of that is related to timing. And in terms of just a person who has no other considerations, just themselves and their concern, I would say that it relates mostly to the way the patient is feeling about how their quality of life is being impacted by whatever it is that concerns them. And the best thing to do is gain information. And the one cautionary note I would leave with your listeners is the internet and social media are filled with information. Some of it is good information, some of it is bad information. It may be inaccurate, and so the ultimate destination is a board-certified plastic surgeon, not necessarily to schedule surgery, but to learn as much as you can to be able to make a good and informed decision.
And if they're looking to have that consultation booked, do they have to be in person, or can it be done online? And what's the process of getting that started?
Well, that's a great question, and it reminds me, and many of us, of the COVID days. But yeah, we do offer virtual consultations. A virtual consultation can be very valuable. Obviously, it's a bit limited if it's not in person in terms of the nuances of a physical examination in person. But we can learn a lot from a virtual consultation. I would say the patient can certainly get to know your surgeon virtually if that surgeon offers it. We've been offering that ever since the days of COVID. And we stayed with it because we found that to be a very useful and valuable tool. Particularly, I have a lot of out-of-town patients. So when my patients are from out of state and they want to decide whether or not it's worth their while to consider surgery with us, a virtual consultation initially to learn a little bit about us and our practice, certainly learn about me as their surgeon if they feel a good connection, and get their questions answered, specifically related to whether or not they're good candidates and the nuances of what's involved with surgery, expectations, recovery, etc. And then if that initial virtual consultation is valuable enough for them to have learned good information, then they'll probably want to come back and see us in person. And that probably happens, I would say, Alan, 95% of the time.
Excellent. And whenever they're considering trying to find that perfect surgeon, what are the couple of things that you would, suggest to them in their evaluations?
So back to the fact that we have a lot of information available online today, and the still the very common method by which patients find plastic surgeons is through friends and family that might have had a good experience. That's a very excellent and valuable and legitimate way. The other way is to Google. You will find websites, you will find reviews. I think that good reviews are a good start. If you see good reviews by a various number of patients, that's probably a good start to learn that, hey, at least one or two people had something good to say about this surgeon. The website can be very valuable. We have a very robust website in order to be able to provide patients with good information. And then I would tell any one of your patients who's considering this, I would not necessarily hinge too much on whether the consultation is free or not free, because I think that if you're going to consider surgery, the vast majority of plastic surgeons, and that would be us included, will deduct the consultation fee. So it's basically was like a free consultation if you go ahead and have surgery. But I want all of your listeners to know that they're meeting someone with years and years of experience who are giving their time and expertise and opinion to you as the potential patient. And that experience, I think, has quite a lot of value, because you can really trust a board-certified plastic surgeon with their knowledge and experience that the information that you're being provided is accurate and precise.
Excellent. If you're looking to book a free consultation, if you move forward with surgery, otherwise just a regular consultation with Dr. Ram Kalus, you definitely want to head over to mountpleasantplasticsurgery.com. There's a great form right on there that you can request your consultation. You can also call into his office. And if you're not following him on socials, would highly recommend that you do so. We're going to have regular episodes coming up that will be published throughout normal social media channels to get incredible insights as we continue to dive deep into future patient testimonies and transformations that he's done, things that are changing within the industry, and lots of other great insights that whether you have had plastic surgery, you're considering it, or maybe you're even considering getting into the field one day, this is a great source of information for you. Dr. Kalus, thank you for hosting Sculpting Your Soul. And for our patients and listeners that are out there, thank you for joining us on Sculpting the Soul. Remember, beauty is not just about looks. It's about confidence and feeling your best. Until next time, remember your journey and stay true to yourself.
Thank you, Alan.